with the Small Business Administration at the Wichita District Office. And today we're going to go over the disaster loan programs, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL, the Paycheck Protection Program, and also some other things that business owners should keep in mind when it comes to debt relief and other options that are out there beyond these two programs. Okay, let's just start. Okay, so the Economic Injury Disaster Loan and Advances, the EIDL, that it's been a program that's been around for decades and was functional for a short period before the system was overrun and they switched to a new portal. But this has been a program that the agency is trying to catch up on, and on behalf of everyone at the SBA, we do apologize for the long delays on this. But these are some of the statistics for those EIDL loans and advances. You can see the national and the Kansas stats for that. The Paycheck Protection Program are loans processed by our lenders, SBA lenders. And the first round you see at the top of the page, you see the national numbers there. $342 billion was processed before the appropriation ran out. And the reason why it ended on the evening of April 15th was because that amount of money was what Congress allocated for the Paycheck Protection Program. So it had to close at that point. By then, Kansas received about 26,000 loans for over $4 billion. And then the president recently signed new legislation that appropriated more funding to the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL program. And you see there at the bottom, from April 27th through May 1st, another $176 billion were allocated nationally. And of that, $815 million were approved for businesses here in Kansas. And the changes that were made to the program, they wanted to ensure that big banks weren't the ones hogging up the pipeline, if you will. And so over 61% of the loans, the Paycheck Protection Program loans that have been approved since April 27th have been through lenders, through banks and credit unions with assets under $10 billion. In fact, that represents about 61% of the loan volume in total. So that really helps our rural areas, our smaller banks, community banks. That's a welcome change. It also allowed the lenders in smaller communities to process them and get their applications through. So there's been an improvement there. The latest funding, this is what was appropriated. 30 billion were designated, as I just mentioned, for smaller banks and credit unions. An additional 60 billion was allocated for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL, along with the advances. Up until Monday, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan portal, which is an online application on the SBA website, was closed. And on Monday, they opened it up for agricultural related businesses. And so we've been getting the word out. I guess of all the Economic Injury Disaster loans that were processed, there was a disparity in not helping the agricultural related businesses, and that's any business, whether it's agritourism, anything to do with fibers, grains, ranchers, so forth. They can apply this week through that web page. And by the way, this just in case people start asking the question on the Q&A, this presentation will be emailed to everyone that is on today's call, and it'll be a PDF, and these links will be active in there, and we'll also answer a lot of the Q&As or questions, if we can't get to them during the call, we'll make sure they're all answered, and then you will have this presentation and the Q&A for you to to work through. And there's some details on this presentation that I won't be able to read line for line, and so you'll have enough time to go through all that pertinent information. So the current status of the economic injury disaster loan and the advances, which, by the way, is the advance is something new to the economic injury disaster loan, which, as I said, that program has been around for decades, and the loan itself, the purpose of it is to help small businesses pay their ongoing monthly bills for a 6-month period after a disaster. This was created a long time ago, and after a disaster, even if you're not physically impacted by a tornado or hurricane or a flood, your business goes down, the sales volume goes down because the people who are affected by the disaster aren't buying. And so, it's tough to get a loan during that period. And so the SBA steps up and provides these loans based on what the business would need to stay solvent, to break even for a 6-month period. The proceeds of a loan are not earmarked or restricted to any specific thing like payroll. They're simply meant to help keep the business solvent and break even at least for 6-month period after disaster. Right now, they are processing all of the economic injury disaster loan applications that have been received since the declaration was declared here in Kansas on, I believe, March 21st, which was a Saturday. And so they are slowly working through those, along with the hundreds of thousands of applications across the country. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, the SBA is only accepting new applications from those related to agriculture, businesses related to agriculture. When the SBA resumes, and we don't know when or if that will happen, if that's a question, the non-agricultural businesses or everyone else can apply online through the SBA website. So if you've applied for the EIDL already, what to do, and that's probably the bulk of the calls that I receive and emails. Where is, we're not receiving any communication. And right now, just to give you a little bit of context, the original portal that received these applications served the agency and the businesses very well in a regional disaster like Texas being hit by Hurricane Harvey. It was the capacity for that original program was not designed for hundreds of thousands of applications from Juneau, Alaska to Key Largo, Florida. And so it was overwhelmed. And for about a week there at the end of March, the only way to submit an application was to actually download the PDFs and then fax them or email them or mail them in to the disaster center. And so people did that. And then the new portal was opened up on, I believe, March 30th, which was a Monday. And so people started applying that third way. And so right now the agency is consolidating. People applied multiple times, so they're sorting through those. Basically, this is probably no comfort to people that have been waiting over 3 weeks to hear back, but it's taking, there's a reason why it's taking so long, and we apologize for that. But right now, those of us at the district office and even some of the people that answer the call center, disaster customer service phone number, sometimes they can see the status, they can see the application in the system. And I don't know which system they have access to of those 3 ways that we receive those disaster applications, but sometimes they can't. And so it's been frustrating. There's the 800 number and the email. I've been suggesting people, try to reach out to find the status of things. But if you received a application confirmation number that begins with the number 3, uh, that's a good thing. It's currently being processed. Some people did not receive a confirmation number. If they successfully um, submitted the application online and they went through the questionnaire, and at the end you click the box confirming you're not a robot, and then it gave you the message that your application was received successfully. Rest assured, you are in the system. It's just taking time to get those things processed. Um, so many people are receiving their advance without warning. If a business had 6 employees, one day they wake up and their bank tells them that $6,000 was deposited into their account. There's no email. It's been very confusing. I completely relate. But the agency has been trying to process the advances as soon as possible. They do some vetting. They maybe check the credit score and do some vetting to ensure that it is a legitimate business. They'll process the advance. They'll send the advance to your bank account. And then when they actually get down to processing the loan or creating the loan offer for you to approve, they will do it again in more detail. And so some people, like I said, will receive the advance without warning, but rest assured that's the first step. So after you receive the advance, or if you didn't click the option to ask for an advance, you will eventually receive an email with a link to a secure website. And when you click on that link, you can see the image on the screen there. That's what the web page will look like. It'll ask you to set up a username, password. You will log in, and you will see what the economic injury disaster loan offer is. And there's a sliding scale there. You see people can accept the full amount or as little as $1,000 of it. As you see, the terms are for all of these loans are the same. They're all 30-year terms. So you can take as long as you need, up to 30 years to repay the loan. They all have an interest rate for small businesses at 3.75%. Nonprofits are 2.75%. The first payment would begin 12 months after receiving the funds in your account. And it gives you the payment amount, monthly payment amount based on the amount that you choose. So after you've confirmed that you want a portion or all of the loan, you will then confirm that, and then at the bottom you see it'll ask you to electronically sign the loan agreement. And after you do that, the funds are to be dispersed within 5 working days. I spoke to someone yesterday, and it's been longer than 5 working days, and I can't explain that, but usually it's within 3 to 5 working days after everything's been approved that you'll receive the funds of the economic injury disaster loan. So, like I mentioned, you may receive the advance, but that doesn't necessarily mean the full loan will be approved. The SBA may email you to ask you for a specific documentation to clear up any discrepancies. They may ask you, especially if it's a large amount, for maybe a tax return or something to complete the processing. But some people will be declined, and we gave some of the reasons why some businesses are declined for the economic injury disaster loan. And if you are, you'll receive an email with the reason, and also a specific email address, phone number, and mailing address where you can request to have your application reconsidered. You can, if they gave you a reason and you have documentation to prove otherwise, you're highly encouraged to ask for that reconsideration. I think, I know you have 3 months to do that after you receive that decline letter. So now on to the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. It is a program that was developed by, passed through Congress, and it was meant to help small businesses maintain their payroll for an 8-week period, 2 months. And if the loan is used for payroll, at least 75% of the funds are used to bring people back on, or get back to full staff, then the loan would be forgiven. That's the purpose of the PPP. Most businesses, including nonprofits, ag related companies, can apply and be approved. Hospitals can, if they, you see the point there, if they're not, they're exempt from taxation, and they receive less than 50% of the funding from a state or local government. That doesn't include Medicaid money. They can qualify. Businesses that are not eligible, you see them down there. And self-employed businesses, those single operator, sole proprietor businesses can apply, but the loan qualification or the maximum amount is based on your Schedule C for 2019. So you would need to complete your 1040 Schedule C before visiting a bank. And once again, these PPP loans are processed by lenders. Okay, so I won't go through all of this, but for self-employed businesses with no employees, as I said, complete your Schedule C. The maximum loan amount is based on the net profit of the business, and that's on line 31 of the Schedule C. And then as you can see, these are the details. Basically, they take your net profit, whatever it was for last year, they divide it by 12, and then multiply it by 2.5 to get the maximum loan amount. And the forgiveness part of that is they take the same net profit for last year, and instead of it being 2.5 months, it's only 2 months, or 8 weeks out of 52 weeks. And you can see how that's calculated. The net profit amount is capped at 100,000. And if you have qualified expenses on your Schedule C, deductions for interest, rent, utilities, so forth, they can also be included, but they can't be more than 25% of a loan when it comes to forgiveness. And then this goes through the process for those self-employed, business owners that don't have employees, where the calculation is not based on payroll. And once again, everyone will receive this presentation as a PDF, so you can get through these details when you receive it. Farmers can also apply. There are certain rules for partnerships where the partnership itself can apply, but not the individual partners. S or C corporations can also do the same. And nonprofits, depends on their situation, if they have employees or no employees. And for LLCs, they should choose the scenario that applies to them as far as how it's calculated. And once again, you meet with your lender, and your lender goes through all this with you. Seasonal employers, this was something new. Businesses that have fluctuating employment throughout the year. People can choose the 12-week period for last year, either beginning February 15th or March 1st through June 30th, to get the average monthly payroll for the business this time of the year, and have their loan calculation based on that. I don't know if I missed the slide, but for employers with W-2 employees, the way it works is you take your average monthly payroll for last year, and whatever that amount is, you divide payroll for the whole year. You don't include business, salaries over 100,000, and you divide that by 12, and then you multiply it by 2.5. So 2.5 months worth of the average monthly payroll for last year. And that's the maximum loan amount you can be approved for. You don't have to accept the entire amount. You can ask for less from the lender. And then from the day you receive the loan funds, at least to get maximum forgiveness, of course, that's the goal, is to have the whole loan forgiven. You have to use at least 75% of the PPP funds to pay for payroll-related expenses. So it's 75% or more. That includes, of course, salaries, tips, commissions. If an employee was on sick leave or vacation, you can consider those. Uh, Matching funds for retirement, anything related to your normal payroll process. We're not asking people to change the way they do payroll. And the goal is to keep or maintain your staff, bring people back on that were recently laid off because of declining revenues, and to get the maximum amount, you want to use as much of it as possible to staff up during the 8-week period after you receive the loan funds in your account. 25% of it also, or less, can be qualified business expenses. So these things down here, mortgage, rent, utilities, interest, and so forth, can also be submitted to the bank. During that 8-week period, you had to pay rent, mortgage, interest, whatever. So you would add the payroll costs, the expenses that you actually had during the 8 weeks, plus some of these qualified business expenses. And if that equals the entire PPP loan amount, then the entire thing can be forgiven. And that's the goal. So what should you do, or how should you use it? As I just mentioned, immediately after you receive the funds in your account, we suggest that you use all of that fund to pay your payroll expenses. In fact, to make it really easy to evaluate, is you have the PPP funds in a specific account that is used to pay the payroll for that 8-week period. Lenders have to, once it's been approved by the SBA gives the bank a loan authorization number. And the bank, at that point, when they receive that, they have 10 days to disperse the entire amount in your account, and so you can start working on it. The borrower also has a deadline, and within 20 days of receiving that loan authorization, if the bank is still waiting for the borrower to provide some documentation, you basically have 20 days to provide that to your lender, or the loan itself will be canceled. So these are the keys when it comes to the PPP Paycheck Protection Program funding, and to maximize forgiveness. The goal is to maintain your full-time equivalent, your staff throughout the 8-week period, to bring people back on. That's the goal. You need to maintain these employees with their wages. During that time, you can't reduce those hourly rates of pay or salary by more than 25%, because that could impact the forgiveness. And so the people say, well, how is that measured? Well, basically, we're going to be the lender will be looking back at your payroll levels in the February-March timeframe. Really, February 15th is the date, and they will base your staff count on what you had back then. So you try to keep those going. If you cannot maintain your the full-time equivalents, it doesn't have to be the same person. It just has to be the employee. So if you had 3 full-time and 2 part-time, if one of them quits or decides not to come back, you could bring someone else in. It doesn't have to be the same persons. It can be, it's just the number of employees is what's looked at. There was some guidance over the weekend that if you offer to rehire your employee and the employee declines to come back and work for you, people have said, well, how am I, supposed to deal with that? Well, that would not affect the forgiveness. If you offer to rehire the same employee for the same hours and wage rates, and the employee declines, you need to document that. You need to show that on May 4th, you called uh, James, and he said he didn't want to come back. He'd rather just take unemployment. You document that you called that person on that day. If you have an email, that would be great. Have them respond with a yes or no. And if they say on the phone they don't want to come back, you email them and say, I called you to rehire you for the same hours and wages, and you declined. If this is not true, please respond. That way you have something in writing, and situations like that will not impact the forgiveness of the PPP loan. And we are still waiting for guidance. Just so you know, there are a lot of questions that right now we can't answer because we are waiting for guidance from Treasury and the SBA about unique situations, including, businesses that, they got their loan on the last week of April and the state still has them shut down. Um, how are they supposed to deal with that? And right now, things are being discussed about those situations. I don't think the Congress men and women knew that was going to happen when they came up with these provisions. So just have a little patience. There will be guidance, and I believe, I can't say for sure, but situations like that where a business can't bring their staff back because they're not allowed open, they're not allowed to reopen their doors, shouldn't be a detriment to the small business owner. So hold tight. If you applied for and received an economic injury disaster loan and a PPP loan, these are the deal. This is basically a description of each one. It's very important for you to use those PPP funds for payroll during that 8-week period. If you received a PPP and you got your EIDL, we suggest that you segregate the funds, put them in different accounts, and to ensure that the PPP funds are what is used to fulfill the payroll of the business. Yeah, we'll just go from there. One other thing to note is if you received an advance of the economic injury disaster loan, the grant part of the EIDL, businesses have to know that you can't take full advantage of the grant or the advance and receive 100% forgiveness of the PPP. You can't be at an advantage just because you applied and received both, benefits of both programs versus another business that just got the EIDL or only applied for the PPP. So if you received an economic injury disaster loan advance, the grant that was just sent to your account, and you received a PPP loan, you need to understand that advance is basically an advance on the forgiveness of the PPP. So essentially, if you received a $3,000 advance, when it comes time to calculate the PPP, they would deduct $3,000 of the forgiveness because you already essentially have that $3,000. So I'll have my name and number at the bottom of this presentation. You can give me a call if you don't quite understand that, I can explain it further. But just know that by law, people cannot essentially double dip and take advantage of federal benefits or forgiveness or grant money for any one program. One thing to keep in mind is the IRS also has some COVID-19 related benefits, one of which that I highlight here is the employee retention credit. That's a fully refundable tax credit for employers that will equal 50% of qualified wages up to $5,000 per employee for the rest of the year. If you receive the PPP and forgiveness for that, you would not be eligible for the retention credit from the IRS. But if, for example, you just applied for the EIDL, you may be able to take advantage of that. So keep that in mind. We also want to let people know that our regular loan programs, the 7A and 504, are available. And for those borrowers that have an existing 7A loan or 504, we have a debt relief program in which the SBA will make payments to the lender on behalf of the borrower, paying the interest and principal for 6 months. And as you see, the fourth bullet point down, if you go to a lender between now and September 27th and obtain a 7A or 504, the SBA will do the same. Borrowers can also request 6 months of deferment. And so that these are great, programs, above and beyond the PPP and the economic injury disaster loan. The place where we have been going to get the latest guidance, fact sheets, etc., is this Treasury website. And I highly, all my emails to everyone that contacts me, I always put this link because it's the place to go if you want to, dig into the details and check out the FAQs and so forth. This is our contact information. These are the people here that work at the district office level. Most of us are working from home. I'm in the office today. I'm Michael Almack there at the bottom. My office number you can also try is 316-269-6275. And as Greg Jordan mentioned at the beginning of the program, the Small Business Development Center here in Kansas has some really good webinars that they're putting on this week and next and beyond related to COVID-19 assistance and also, strategies on how to best recover and, get through this the right way. So please check out that website. And with that, I will go back to the regular screen and maybe look at some of these questions. Should I go to the Q&A? Let's go to the Q&A. Yeah, people that have applied early, I don't know what to tell you. The agency historically has always addressed every EIDL loan application within 2 weeks. But it's taking, now it's been a month, over a month, and people are still waiting. Rest assured that it is in the system, and it's probably the reason why they only opened up the portal this week for agricultural businesses, because the focus is to get those original applications addressed one by one. So it is coming. You will receive communication about the status, whether it's a decline letter or you get the advance without any warning, or the SBA may ask you for certain documentation to complete the loan, or like I said, you'll get that one email with a link to view your offer. And so please check your email address and check your spam folder in the event that these .gov emails go to your spam. I got an EIDL advance and a PPP offer that I have not signed yet. I'm needing to know if the EIDL advance will be subtracted from the PPP, and the answer is yes. If you applied for both programs, basically that advance would be an advance, if you will, on the Paycheck Protection Program forgiveness calculation. And people have said, well, that's not fair, or well, you can't double dip. And one thing I tell people is, okay, you received $3,000 of the advance. You have that right now in the account in your bank. If you truly want to zero out your PPP loan when the forgiveness is calculated after the 8 weeks, let's say the end of June or early July, you visit your lender, provide them with your payroll records, and whatever the bank needs to ensure that the PPP funds were used for payroll, 75% on payroll expenses or more. And let's say you used it all up. And normally that PPP loan would be 100% forgiven. Well, you can at that point hand the bank the advance you received, the $3,000, and it would be zeroed out, and that would be the end of it. If you don't do that, then basically there'll be a balance on the PPP loan, which is a 1% loan for a 2-year term. So you'd have 2 years to pay that balance of $3,000 is the example I gave you. Payroll protection loans is 8 weeks. It's based on 2.5 months of your average monthly payroll for last year, and it's meant for the 8-week period after you get the loan. And so the 6 months where you get that's the EIDL loan itself, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, usually a much larger loan, and that's meant to help you maintain, cover your bills, at least break even, stay solvent for 6 months. So that's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Can you use it for payroll taxes, unemployment, anything that comes out of a paycheck? You're referring to the PPP program, and yes, that like I said, wages, commissions, tips, vacation pay, sick pay, the retirement contributions, your state and local taxes, which would include unemployment. The only thing that's not calculated in the forgiveness are the federal FICA taxes, the federal employment taxes, both the employee share and the employer share. Those are not part of the calculation. So yes, do your payroll as you normally do. Is this a personal mortgage? I don't think that applies. None of this is personal. This is for your business, both programs. The EIDL is a 30-year term loan. It's a flat interest rate. And by the way, there's no prepayment penalties. So you can take as long as 30 years to pay it back, but you can pay it off early, and there's no other fees or prepayment penalties to do so. What if your employees are not allowed to work because of the current shelter-in-place guidelines? I'm very confident that situation will be answered by Congress, between Congress and Treasury and the SBA before the guidance is issued. I think they're going to battle things out about that situation. Right now, we don't really have an answer. What we've been given right now is the 8-week period, and it's by the law itself, is the 8 weeks following the date you receive the PPP funds. That's when the clock starts ticking, and that's when you need to use the payroll, the funds for the payroll. So there may be some provisions. It's not a comfort to you right now. I know you're anxious about this, but right now we don't have an answer, unfortunately. On slide 18, you mentioned there's a 20-day deadline to provide needed documentation. Talk to your lender about what documentation is needed when you apply. I'm sure they will let you know that day that, hey, we need this. In fact, they may not even try to have the SBA authorize it until they get that from you. But just so everybody knows, the appropriation for the new round of PPPs is limited, and when the loan volume, exceeds the amount appropriated, the program will have to stop. So time is of the essence for you to talk with your lender about obtaining a PPP loan. If I got the EIDL advance, do I have to accept the loan? Things are bouncing around here. Is the advance grant, and will the SBA require a company to provide documents as how the money was used? Like I said, you may receive the advance before you get the loan offer. That advance is yours. The loan offer itself, you can accept the full amount or as little as 1,000. However, I guess if people never sign it, like you never agree to it, I imagine at some point thereafter, the whole thing would be null and void and canceled. So I haven't received guidance on that, but in order to receive the economic injury disaster loan itself, you would have to digitally sign that document to accept it and the terms that go with it. I have no idea if our Office of Investigator General will be auditing, businesses. I've already answered a few questions that, when you sign the bottom line to accept the economic injury disaster loan or the PPP, you are certifying that these loans are being used for your business, the business that was approved, not any other business, and that you need it because of the economic hardship you're going through right now because of COVID. If it turns out you don't use it for those reasons, there are federal laws. These are federal loans, and you just don't want to do that because federal laws are not very nice when it comes to penalties and criminal charges. Okay. It should be noted that while an employee can decline employment at the same time that they left, the KDOL stated that this very thing will disqualify the employee for unemployment benefits, and the business owner is to report this employee to the Kansas Department of Labor. That guidance that I read earlier that stated that if you offer an employee to come back for the same wage and the hours, and they decline, that would make them ineligible for or would affect their unemployment. People have asked me about unemployment, and I do not. That is something that's handled by the state. It's nothing that we deal with here. We can't answer specific questions. Every state has their own laws. But I imagine that the state of Kansas Department of Labor will be looking into these things to ensure that the unemployment benefits are going to those that truly qualify and are not disqualified. So I believe that statement to be true. I don't know for a fact, but yes. Were businesses allowed to apply and receive both EIDL and PPP loans? They can. However, the benefits, they cannot basically enjoy the benefits of both programs. So as I said, if a business does apply for both and they receive an advance, that advance amount would be subtracted from the forgiveness of the PPP loan. In a sense, it is an advance on the forgiveness portion of the PPP. So they can apply to both, but just because a business does should not put them at an advantage over a business that only applies for one or the other. How does self-employer, sole owner document payroll expense during the 8-week period? Well, your PPP loan for the self-employed that have no W-2s is not based on payroll per se. It is based on your Schedule C net profit, and it's a portion thereof. The PPP funds should be used for the business to pay yourself as well. And basically the forgiveness amount is already basically calculated in there, uh, with the exception of those deductible expenses, as I mentioned. If you have a service agreement for, your utilities, your communications, um, rents or leases, uh, up to 25% of those during the 8-week period after you get the PPP could be added on to enhance the forgiveness. But essentially, for sole proprietors, there's no payroll to be evaluated. Um, Self-employed Schedule C, they can receive 2.5 times their net profit. Okay, how do they prove that 8 weeks of payroll was paid? Or how do they get loan forgiveness? I think I just answered that. The 75% of it is basically forgiven, and if they have um, deductible amounts from that were noted in their Schedule C for last year, for example, for mortgage interest and so forth, uh, that can also enhance the forgiveness part to above 75%. And everyone will get this presentation so you can read it in more detail. Agricultural businesses, well, no, the agricultural businesses the can apply this week for the economic injury disaster loan, and the Schedule C is not a question in that application. Basically, you log on to the SBA.gov, the website, and it'll ask you for revenues, um, and cost of goods sold, and also expenses related to the farm itself or ranch. And so, no, the Schedule C is not part of that calculation. I'm an independent contractor, physical therapist, and you're the only employee. Well, you may apply for the Paycheck Protection Program based on, as I mentioned earlier, your 2019 Schedule C. If your net profit, line 31, is zero or a negative number, then you would not be eligible for a PPP loan. And also, that net profit amount cannot exceed 100,000. So just keep those in mind. Please contact your SBA lender and apply. Please clarify, as independent contractor, will be making the payroll check out to me and then send the respective federal payroll taxes due. Correct method or to proceed. As I mentioned, as a sole proprietor, it's not based on payroll per se. It's based on your Schedule C net profit, and if you have any deductible items noted on your 2019 Schedule C, those can be portions of that. Up to 25% of those expenses can be part of the forgiveness aspect. So it has nothing to do with payroll if your PPP loan was not based on a payroll calculation. For sole proprietors, it is based on Schedule C, line 31. Suppose your full-time equivalents increase. How does that affect loan forgiveness? Well, the whole point is to bring back full staff and add more. However, the maximum loan amount itself is based on the average monthly payroll in 2019. And so that's the maximum amount. So if you increase the number of employees in your business, that doesn't increase now if you add more employees, that doesn't increase the loan amount, and you can't ask for more. It's a one-off loan. A business cannot apply for more than one PPP. And so the goal is to get back to full staff and increase those. However, those employees above and beyond, if you use 100% of the PPP loan on wages and payroll expenses, that's great. But the maximum amount of a loan is already set, and that is the maximum amount that could be forgiven, regardless if you bring in 10 more employees or not. PPP forgiveness, we can use gross wages and payroll taxes, except FICA. You use, yes, gross wages, commissions, sick leave. People take sick leave during the 8 weeks, or vacation during the 8 weeks. Whatever you pay them, what's on the payroll records uh, is what is calculated, with the exception of the federal taxes. Local taxes, yes. The unemployment taxes, yes, can be included, but federal taxes, both the employee's portion and the employer's portion, employer's amount of the FICA would not be included. You cannot know the prepay payroll. No, it's payroll and other expenses either before the 8-week period or after the 8-week period are not to be included and will not be considered for the payroll evaluation of the for the payroll protection program. It's meant to cover the actuals, what actual payroll, wages, expenses, and so forth were done during that week. It wouldn't include reimbursements to employees either. It really has to do with what is normally in a payroll, process. You're not supposed to really change. We're not asking you to change the way you do payroll. Do things as you normally do them, and the lender will ask you for specific payroll records at the end of the 8-week period. Well, the 20 days to provide documentation to the lender, we mention that because if the bank receives a partial application from you for the PPP and says, we still need this document, whatever that may be, if the bank were to go ahead and obtain the authorization number from the SBA, well, you have, from the date they get the authorization number to approve the loan, you have 20 days to get that back to the bank. And frankly, the bank has 10 days after the authorization to disperse the money in its totality. So you need to work with your lender, make sure you get that done. PPP loan, funding won't last forever. I suggest you work with your lender very quickly. Real estate agents, does their vehicle qualify for working capital? If you are a sole proprietor, if the deductions that you were allowed or could qualify for on the Schedule C for last year, if it was based on that particular expense, then up to 25% of it would. So the answer is it depends on what your Schedule C accounted for last year. No, if you applied for the EIDL and you got your PPP and you still haven't received the advance, you can't really decline the advance. People should consider it. It's basically an advance. It's the free money you get for the PPP, basically. So you're already getting that forgiveness ahead of time. I guess it's possible for you to call customer service to have, if you don't receive any advance or anything, if you really want to decline and cancel the whole thing. I don't know. I mean, I imagine if you were to call the SBA, give them your application confirmation number and say you would like to decline or cancel the whole thing, I imagine there's a way to do that. But as I said, things are complicated right now. But try to do that if you really want to cancel the EIDL and the advance before you get it. Please call the SBA. disaster customer service number. Work comp expenses, it's part of workman's comp is, state local taxes. Um, I will include with this the page number of the guidance on what is included or what is allowed in payroll expenses and what is not. So I will defer to the interim final rule on that. I'll make sure the SBDC sends a link to that page so people can see what is and what is not included when it comes to payroll. I imagine eventually we may be able to, I'm sure we will be able to get breakdowns of loan statistics by county for the PPP, but when it comes to the EIDL, I have no idea how long that would take and if they will publish, by county what loans were dispersed. I don't know if they will do that or when they will do that. So I do not know. Right now, we just have state level statistics for the PPP. If you receive more of the PPP loan than you actually need, no, you cannot use it for, if you use it for anything other than payroll, as I said, to get full forgiveness, 75% of the funds have to be used for payroll expenses. Businesses can use it for other business expenses, but just keep in mind that it's basically going to be a loan. Anything that's not forgiven is a 1% loan that will be due to the bank within 2 years. So keep that in mind. The intent of the PPP is for payroll to bring people back up to full staff and give a break to the employer for doing so. Kansas unemployment benefits for past 5 weeks and then recently received a PPP loan. You'll need to let the state know that you received a PPP loan. I don't know how they're handling it, but you do need to let them know that you received a PPP loan. Or it may end up biting you in the end. You may get, a nasty surprise about what you may owe them, weeks from now. I'm not sure. If you get the EIDL loan, will the advance be added back to the loan balance? No, the advance is a grant, forgiven part of the loan. It's really not a part of the loan. It's an advance. It's a grant up to $10,000 based on the number of employees. So sole proprietors would get 1,000. Businesses with 6 employees will get 6,000, and business with 200 employees will still only get up to 10,000. So no, it's not part of the EIDL loan balance. You mentioned temporary employees. If a company is in need of additional employees and can't find replacements, are temps considered an employee? It depends on how those temporary employees are paid. This is based on your payroll and not the payroll of the temporary agency. So that's a good question. And frankly, we're waiting for guidance on what lenders will be evaluating, like what documents will they be needing from the borrowers to evaluate the payroll. I imagine it's your payroll report, those forms you send to the IRS regarding the federal employment taxes. And I don't know what other documentation is needed, but talk to your lender about that. And I think it may come down to whose payroll the temporary employees are really on. They got to be on your payroll, or you have to show that you paid the gross wages for the employees. So I don't know, Greg, what's our time look like? We're at 11?
We're at 11, and that was the last question.
Okay. I will also get these in the chat, and answer them, and then we'll include the answers along with the slide presentation from today, along with that link to the guidance on what's included in payroll.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael. That was really informative. And as he said, we'll be posting this information, this webinar recording live, along with the slide deck and the question and answer. So on our website at kansassbdc.net/COVID-19. So thank you, Michael, and thank you everybody for attending. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.